Hey divers, so what's this? It looks like Christmas. No, not quite. Alec Peirce, Vintage Scuba. I want to talk to you about another aspect of scuba diving in the old days that you new divers may not be aware of. Some of the old divers just might bring a smile to your crinkly faces. Making your own scuba weights. Yeah, that's right. You see, first of all, let me explain to you that there weren't a lot of dive stores back then. When I started diving in 1958, there was one dive store in Toronto. I lived about an hour and a half from Toronto, a little small town. I didn't drive or anything, and just couldn't get to them. And there was a big dive store in New York City, Central Skin Divers. Again, maybe some of you older folks remember Central Skin Diver. Honest Archie, Central Skin Divers had a great big ad every month in Skin Diver magazine. Oh, it's fantastic. I used to love getting Skin Diver. And it was a big ad. It was like an Honest Ed's ad or a Harbor Freight ad with all kinds of little line diagrams, no color. I had a little picture of a fin, and you want to buy a fin, $9, and all that kind of full of neat stuff. And I used to go, oh, look at that. I'd like to get that. Oh, there's a knife, and all that kind of stuff. It was great. And I actually ordered my first fins from Honest Archie. That's right, $9.95 for a pair of UDT training fins. Old UDT, Underwater Demolition Team, fins, duck feet they were called, $9.95. And I put $10 Canadian into an envelope, $10 bill, yeah, we could do that. Put a stamp on it, 2-cent stamp. You heard that, yeah, 2 cents. And I sent it off to Honest Archie. And about a week later, I get a box back with my UDT frog feet fins in them. I still have them, fins in them. Got it back, and $1 change. That's right, there was no tax. Shipping was free, even to Canada. And the Canadian dollar was more than the American dollar. You know, it's gone up and down over the years, but prior to 1972, it was almost always higher. So there you go. I still have those fins. But we didn't have dive stores. That's the point. No dive stores. So we had a couple of options. If you wanted diving equipment, you ordered it, or you drove a long, long ways to buy it, or you bought it used. There wasn't much used because there weren't many divers. You see, it was pretty tough to get diving equipment. In many cases, if the diving equipment was relatively simple, we made it. You've seen already some of my homemade scuba equipment. That's right, homemade tanks and homemade regulators. Now, they weren't all that common because you really had to be pretty mechanically inclined and had to have access to war surplus stores and so on in order to do that heavy-duty stuff. But the other stuff, you know, we could often make it. One case in point is weight belts. Some of the early weight belts were belts. Ordinary belt that you would swipe from your dad's closet, or make one up from a piece of webbing and a buckle of some sort. The early weight belts, they had hooks, just a metal, a wire hook that hooked around and hooked on. And we'd make them out of coat hanger wire, out of fence wire. We lived in the country, and we could make them some webbing and some old fence wire. So we made our own belts, and then we came to the weights. Now what am I going to do? Well, there were lots of solutions for that. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if there were divers that went diving with a brake drum attached to their hip, because that's what you had to do. You had to make do with what you had. But one thing that was available in dive stores, and fairly common through the 50s and certainly the 60s, was the ability to make your own weights using a weight mold. That's right, a mold. They actually had a mold that you could buy. And you could pour lead into it, and after it cooled, you could dump the weight out, and you had yourself a real nice weight. Very, very common. Let me show you a couple. Okay, first of all, this is a very typical one. This is a very inexpensive one. Now, when I say inexpensive, I mean that because these are made of aluminum. And aluminum in the 50s and 60s was not cheap. It wasn't stupid money, but this is aluminum. This is what they made aircraft from. And through the Second World War, aluminum was very scarce. We used to actually have drives as a Boy Scout where we would go and collect caps and aluminum tart tins and anything made of aluminum and save it all and donate it to the services so they'd have aluminum. I'm not too sure how much we helped, but it made us feel good. So this is an aluminum weight mold, and this particular weight mold is for 2-pound weight. In fact, I don't know if you can zoom in there, Kevin. Can you zoom in there? Can you see that 2 inside there? There's a 2 inside. Can you see that 2 in there? Both of these has a 2, and I'm going to hold it still here, but I know I'm moving. Relax a minute, because I want to get this one up here, because this has a... You see that? So this is how, when you filled this to the very top, it was 2 pounds of lead. So that's what we would do. We would melt the lead down in a little pot, melting pot of some sort. And then it melted. We'd pour the lead into the aluminum, and it'd be sitting down, pour it in. We'd get enough. We'd pour it in, and fill these up with lead. And then after they cooled, you could turn them over. And this was the hard part. You turn them over and bang them down. These center legs are a little bit longer than the outside. Bang them down, or take a wooden mallet and bang the back of them, and with a little bit of hard work, a little bit of luck, they would pop out. We didn't know anything about release agents at that time, so we didn't know you could spray them with stuff and get it out. But that's how we actually made our lead weights. In fact, my very first lead weights, I'll tell you this story, which is interesting, because it reminds me of my very wonderful and very patient father. I made my own molds. Yeah, I didn't have one. I didn't have a dive store. I couldn't buy one of these. I saw them advertised, but gosh, they were $6 and $7 each. You can't buy a weight for that kind of money now. But anyway, that was a lot of money back then. I was making 25 cents an hour delivering fish and chips. Local store in Lindsay. But anyway, another story, another time. But I actually made my own mold. That was the simplest thing in the world. All I did was I just made something like this out of wood. I took 4 pieces of wood, and I actually nailed them to my dad's wooden workbench in the garage. 4 pieces of wood, so I made a square. And then I took 2 more pieces of wood, and I put them inside to make the holes for the belts, you see? So I had something that looked just like this, made of wood. And then I melted lead, and I poured it in. And it was good, and it was bad. It was good because I didn't have to bang the weight out and work at it. The wood, I just pulled the wood off. You see, it's just easy to take apart. It was bad because I had to make a new mold every time. And it was bad for another reason too. Eventually my dad came out, saw the marks on his workbench, and wasn't too pleased. But that's what I did in the old days. Now here's another set of molds here. This one is different. It's got handles on it. Got these little legs that stick out. And this one is similar. You see how the legs, you see how they stick up there, Kevin? The legs and the inserts are higher than the mold. You see that? Can you see that? So after you get the lead poured in, you can bang it down, and hopefully without too much work, the lead mold would come out. So that's what we had to do. So where did we get the lead? That's the next question. Where do you get the lead? Well, in those days, there was lots of lead around. Lead's not popular today. Actually, we don't even use lead weights anymore. Well, they're still lead weights, but they're coated with plastic. They should be. I don't know what your local dive store does, but most modern professional dive stores now, they don't sell raw lead to go into the lakes and the rivers and the quarries and the ocean. It's coated with plastic to protect it, or if it's a lead shot, it's in a vinyl bag of some sort, rubber bag or vinyl bag, so the lead itself is not exposed to the environment. But the point is that there's not much lead. It's hard to find. Where would you go if you wanted to find some lead right now? It'd be a problem, wouldn't it? Well, let me tell you, the sources of lead. Some of them still exist. Tire weights. That's right. You go to your local tire store, you know, the store where you buy tires and have them mounted and balanced and so on. You go to the local tire store, and you will find a big bucket on the ground right beside where the guy, you know, puts the tires on. You'll find a big bucket full of old weights. Because when he puts new tires on, he takes the old tire plug, pulls the old weights off. There could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There could be a half a pound of weights on one tire. Maybe not that much, but they're all little pieces of lead with a steel clip on them to hold them onto the rim of the tire. He pulls those off and he throws them into a bucket. When the bucket is full, I guess they call it scrap man or whatever, and he comes in and maybe he even gives them a bit of money for them. Tire weights. That's right. They used to throw them away. And there was a scuba diver around that in the old days, because all the local scuba divers, hey, I'd like those tire weights. I'll come over and clean them up off the floor for you once a week if you, okay? Sure, Jack, all right. And so he would get tire weights. Now, the other place we would get them is the junkyard. You can go to the junkyard. We had junkyards in those days, dumps if you want to call them, but more like junkyards where they had good junk, like metal and bits of aluminum and stuff. And very often there was a pile of lead. What was the lead from? Well, in the old days, in the early part of the 1900s, say up to about 1960, 1970, there was lots of lead in houses up to that point, because all of the drains had lead in them. Okay, so you might have a long pipe coming down from, say you had a 2-story, so you had an upstairs washroom, so you'd have a long pipe coming down from upstairs, and the pipe could be made of black steel, could be made of pot copper, some other material, come down. But when it came down and it had to go around a bend to get into the septic system or out into the sewers, the sanitary sewers out in the street, those bends were hard to make out of steel pipe. They were made out of lead. Yeah, those U-traps and those bends and the funny shapes, S-bends, they were all made of lead, and they were quite big. They were sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 inches, and heavy. You know, you could pick up maybe 8, 7, 8 pounds of lead on one of those bends. So we'd be at the junkyard all the time, getting these picking up any lead that we saw around. That was great. Lots of lead around in those days. So then we had to melt this stuff. How do we do that? Well, melting's easy. Everybody in those days had an oxyacetylene torch, or maybe a really good a hot plate with a propane burner on it to get it hot, and steal a pot from your mom. Aluminum pot, better, because aluminum doesn't melt very easily. So you get an aluminum pot with a nice heavy base on it, and put it on this, and put some lead in, and pretty soon that lead would melt. Put some more in, cut it up in little pieces. We took an axe and cut the big pieces up, keep pouring it in, and pretty soon you had quite a bit of lead in there. And then once it was all molten, then you would choose the weight. Here's a 3-pound weight, and you smooth 3-pound weight. Good, next, off you go. It's that easy. Now, you may have missed this particular part of this. I did lots of this, hours and hours of this. I remember in the 70s, I was married, and I had 2 little girls. And we would go to this area behind our dive store. It wasn't very big, and kind of a warehousey type of thing, and we would make our lead weights back there. And we might spend hours back there, melting lead over a pot, pouring it into these weight molds. Maybe we'd be back there for 3 or 4 hours doing this. And there's my 2 daughters over there enjoying themselves playing on the floor. We're melting lead. I got to tell you something else. The lead that we were using wasn't clean. No, these traps that they'd taken out of houses that they had demolished, or were replacing the old lead with some modern materials, that lead was full of calcium and all kinds of stuff. I don't want to use the word crap, but it was full of stuff like that, all dried up. And we just throw it into the pot, chop it up with an axe, and throw it in the pot and burn it out. We didn't know about lead poisoning. Who knew about that? Breathing the stuff, who knew about that? So anyway, I'm here, I'm old, I'm healthy, but it isn't necessarily because I was smart. A lot of divers did that. Now, as this went on, the better methods for making weights were made. So this is a different mold. This particular one is on a nice long steel handle, and it's shaped in such a way that, first of all, you get a hip weight. Maybe you can see here, you see the shape there, Kevin? So you end up with a hip weight. A hip weight is simply a big weight, usually 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16-pound weights. Yeah, it could be. 6, 8, 10 was quite common, and the hip weight was curved, so it took the shape of your hip. It had a bit of a curve to it. That's why it was called a hip weight. And you pour the lead into this. Now, there's no way of knowing how much is in it, so I can make a 6, an 8, or a 10-pound weight with this. What I would do is I'd put this onto a weigh scale and pour the lead in until the weigh scale said 6. I would stop pouring, lift it off, and set it down to cool. And then when it was finished, I'd bang that 6-pound weight out, you see? Or I can make an 8 or a 10. So that's another type of weight mold. Now later, and partly because of the problems with getting the weight mold apart, they got pretty fancy. So this is a later weight mold, and this is pretty easy, pretty neat. This one opens up. It's like making a waffle. So you see, there's the shape of the weight. You can see it there. There's the matching half. So you close this up, and we used to put a C-clamp on here to hold that tightly together, right? Okay, and then there's an opening in the top. See the opening there, Kevin? The opening in the top, and we set this down, pour the lead in, and when the lead got up to the open, we stopped pouring. And we'd wait for it to cool, and when it cooled, we'd take the clamp off, open this up, give it a little bang, and the 2-pound weight would fall out. And son of a gun, the 2-pound weight would say, U.S. divers, 2 pounds, right on there. Pretty neat, huh? It'd be imprinted right on the lead. There's another one. This one was for 3 pounds, 3-pound weight. You see that? And here's one more. This is kind of the ultimate. Yeah. One wooden handle is broken. But look at this contraption. This is U.S. divers as well. Santa Ana, California. They were on West Warner Avenue at that time. They moved around quite a bit. And this particular weight is for, I'm going to guess 6 or 8. This is a 6-pound weight, so it's the same type of thing. You see, it's 2 pieces. I'll just break it open here. You see, this goes down like that. That goes down like that, and it opens up, and there you go. So there's your 2 pieces. You see the shape of the weight that would come out of it. So you put this together, like so. Bring these 2 wooden handles up like that. Really good. And then mount your lead, pour it in, wait for it to cool, and then bang the handles open like so, probably how it got broken, and your lead weight would fall out. Just like that. So there you go. It may sound silly today. You go into a dive store and you see a big display of nice plastic weights, all nice colors, pink, yellow, red, green, blue, all those colors, and lead shot, all those special kind of lead weights. And you're saying as you're watching this, well, what's this guy talking about? That's the way it was. If you wanted lead weights, you had two choices. You had lots of money and you lived close to a dive store, you went and bought them. They were cheap, relatively cheap. But for a poor man like me, just a common guy, most of my kids, the fellows in the clubs, we made our own weights. Collected lead weights, collected plumbing weights, melted them down. We all got together. We made a club event. You know, you can just imagine. Monday night, club meeting, lead pouring night. We'd all get together and we make a bunch of weights for the club. Kind of interesting. I hope that you found it interesting. Anyway, there's some information in there. And if you have any more comments, keep them coming. I love the comments and the questions and the suggestions. Alec Peirce, Vintage Scuba. See you soon.